Good morning. My name is Jada Williams. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a member of your parish committee. We are glad you're here online or in person here in our beautiful sanctuary on this cold winter morning. I'd like to welcome any visitors who are with us this morning. We would love for you to join us downstairs or online for community time following the service. Our mission is to build community, search for meaning, deepen our spirituality, and make a better world. If you have questions about First Parish or Unitarian Universalism, someone from our membership team will be at the welcome table during coffee hour to greet you and answer any questions. Reverend Deborah and Kate Holland, our Director of Lifespan Education, are also available after service and would love to meet you. The COVID risk at this time is low. This means masking is optional. A big thanks to all our service participants whose names are in the order of service. Please remember to silence your cell phones for our time together. Please join me now in taking a moment to say hello to one another, including those who are online this morning. I'd like to take a moment to remind folks that we are excited to finally bring back stewardship suppers, now 2.0. They are now potluck brunches and potluck suppers, hosted by various members of our congregation. There are some spots left, so you don't want to miss this opportunity for fellowship and fun. You can sign up through the Unitarian or downstairs today in the vestry. Larry will be down there. That's the easiest way. By the way, these are not fundraising events. They're just time for us to get together and appreciate each other. We have an announcement from John and Jim.
You get the John and Jim comedy team this morning.
Here we go. And I'm John, he's Jim. No? Did I get it wrong?
So,
Mike.
Oh, Mike, can you hear us? You got to get really close, right?
Sorry, Mike's not here. Okay.
So, meet your planned giving team. There's a whole crew of us have been working on this project. Thank you to many. I won't name them all. But many of you received, or you should receive in a couple of days, this little brochure. And it's funny how expressing an interest in a church activity suddenly puts you in charge.
In recent months, a group of fellow parishioners, congregants, whatever you want to call them, have revitalized First Parish's planned giving effort. Our first effort is this brochure. There are more panels that you can't see there, which you may have or will soon receive in the mail.
And just to be clear, planned giving is an activity completely separate from our annual canvas. When I think about it, it helps sometimes to think as planned giving is the foundation, walls, and roof of your home, permanent and lasting. Canvas is what we do yearly, paying for the utility bills, food, clothing costs, and insurance. Both are necessary, but a little separate.
So what is planned giving? Simply stated, it's the expression of your intent to bequeath cash, stock, or other assets to one or more charities. Estate gifts are commonly used for building endowments, such as the East Sudbury Ministerial Fund, which we have here, that provides for the maintenance of our buildings and is paid for major upgrades in the buildings, such as the kitchen renovation or the new vestry lighting. Endowments can be directed at other specific needs. We have here the Lydia Mariah Child Fund, which is directed to important social action activities. Sources of funds from planned giving are critical for a community such as ours, since our annual canvas simply does not cover building expenses, nor does it cover all of our vital social action work.
And the great thing about planned giving is we're not asking for it now. We're only asking as you depart.
And we're not going to hasten that either.
No, there's no push here. So in the coming weeks, you'll receive more information about planned giving and our efforts to enlist members to join with us to consider an estate gift to First Parish. as we prepare to call our next settled minister. A strong showing of our individual and group deep personal commitment to our beloved spiritual home will demonstrate fiscal strength and commitment.
Why now? Well, because many of us intend to include a bequest to First Parish in our wills, but we haven't quite gotten around to it.
Like some of us.
Who likes to spend time on their will? So let us join in and get it done. More to follow in the coming weeks, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Cullen family will now lead us in the chalice lighting. A heartfelt welcome to all, and let us now turn our hearts and minds to worship.
Good morning. Please join us as we say together, with open minds and loving hearts, we gather to search for meaning, to care for one another, and to work together for a better world.
That's worth a good whoop, right? Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And thank you, choir. And thank you, Marilyn Becker, who has been our guest choir leader this week and last week. Thank you. I hear tell that Polly will be joining us next week, so we're looking forward to her return as well. Yay. And indeed, that was a beautiful rendition of Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Around. You might know that that song was originally titled Don't You Let Nobody Turn You Around. It gained popularity back in 1962 when Ralph Abernathy introduced it to a crowd at the Mount Zion Baptist Church in Albany, Georgia. It caught on quickly and became widely used in demonstrations and marches and protests and gatherings for civil rights. So we gratefully embrace it this morning as our invocation as we continue our monthly theme, which this month is Justice and Equity. My name is Reverend Deborah Bennett, and it is my delight to be with you this morning, as always on a Sunday morning, and to be serving as Wayland's, First Parish in Wayland's interim minister. Today, we invite you to turn your attention to the work of justice and equity for women as we celebrate Women Rising. And I'm glad to see so many of you turned out for this morning's service. To begin our time together, there are so many inspiring women's words I could choose, but the ones I'm going to share seem particularly profound. They're from the great American writer, professor, philosopher, intersectional feminist, poet, civil rights activist, Audre Lorde, and they seem perfect for this morning. She says this: "My silences had not protected me. Your silence will not protect you. But for every real word spoken, for every attempt I had ever made to speak those truths for which I am still seeking, I had made contact with other women, bridging our differences, while we examined the words to fit a world in which we all believed. The fact that we are here, that I speak these words, is an attempt to break that silence and bridge some of those differences between us. For it is not differences which immobilize us, but silence. And there are so many silences that need to be broken." So let us break silence this morning together by singing our opening hymn. It's number 168. That's in the gray hymnal. Please rise as you are able in body or spirit. One more step. Something interesting is about to happen. Kate, we're having church right now. I'm not quite sure. Do you have some work you're trying to do? You have stuff to do. All right, I'll just sit over here.
Okay, so I know some people have seen on our social network that I asked for some things. Did you see that go by, anybody? Yeah. And so I've gotten a lot of people who have said they're very interested in what I'm going to do. And my hope today is that my story is as interesting as what you're hoping for. So on the table, if you can't see, there is a lovely black cat with a yellow bow. there's a sewing machine, there's a typewriter, and there is a little kind of old-timey car. So I also, besides crowdsourcing all of these things from everyone, thank you very much who donated, I have another part in my story. So when I do this, you all have to say, "Votes for women." So let's try it out, okay? Ready? Votes for women. Beautiful, you guys are good at this. So my story is about two women in 1916. It was Nell Richardson and Alice Burke, and they decided that they were going to travel the whole country to talk about getting women the right to vote. So they loaded up their car, which was not red but yellow. It was a little yellow car. And they loaded it full of things. They had a typewriter, they had a sewing machine, they had a sweet little kitten that was all black. And they put a yellow ribbon on him because that was the color for the women's movement. So they packed it up and they had plans. And they got to the first place to talk. And so there was someone who said, "Women are not smart enough to vote." So Nell would quickly go behind the typewriter and she would write up a poem.
Roses are red, violets are blue, men can vote, and women should be allowed too.
And she showed them just how smart women were. And then she would go, someone would say, "Women belong in the home, and they should only be doing things in the home." Well, Alice would come, and she'd get the sewing machine going, and she would make a nice apron and show it to everyone and say, "Look, we can do everything." And so it was exciting, and they moved on, and while they were at different places, they had people yell out, "Vote for women!" There you go. So they were at a stop to get gas, which was, they didn't have gas stations back then. They had to find places that would give them gas. And so they stopped, and a bunch of men crowded around the little yellow car. And so Alice was excited. She jumped up on the chair and started to give her speech, and the men wanted none of it. So being very clever, she hopped down from her seat, and she lifted up the engine's hood, and she started to show them all the things inside the hood. And she showed them how the crank made it work and how those things, and the men were so impressed that by the end, as they were waving goodbye, they were saying, "Vote for women," which was awesome. So has anyone here ever complained about potholes in our roads? Has anybody ever complained about that? Well, just imagine the roads back then. They were dirt and mud, and they would have bad weather. They would have snow, and they would have sleet, and they would have rain. And so poor Alice and Nell were out in all of this weather. And sometimes they would try to go over a puddle, and the poor little car would get stuck in the mud, and it wouldn't move. And sometimes they would have people come with horses and help them out, and sometimes they even had to once leave the car and have somebody get it out and then have it join them after they took the train to their next stop. So it was kind of a tough journey. And so another time, they went to different towns, and they didn't have to worry about having to give their speeches. They were welcomed with picnics and dinners, and people that were at them all said, "Vote for women," because they wanted exactly what Alice and Nell wanted too. They thought it was really important, and so they came together to support them. So finally, after quite a bit of traveling, they came to California, and they were so excited because they had come from the East Coast and gone all the way across the country to California. And so they did their speeches, they heard people call out, and they were so excited, except there was one thing that kind of held back their excitement. They were only halfway done. So they went over the top of the country, and now to get back to the East Coast, they had to go across the bottom of the country. And so they made this amazing trip, it's a true story. These two ladies actually did this in their yellow car. And so eventually, in September of 1916, they got back to New York. And so they were greeted with a big crowd who said, and it was a lovely, lovely experience going all the way across. And just imagine these two sunburned, tired women in their yellow car that was muddy and dusty and probably really beat up by that point. And the kitten was now a grown cat. It's taken them so long. And it's truly amazing to me, too, to think there were no road maps back then. You just had to go for it. Like, there's no Google Maps, there was no paper maps, there was nothing. America was kind of uncharted territory. But these women were amazing. So I also want to point out that it is a sweet story, and I really do like this story. But during suffrage, a lot of women went through worse than having their car stuck in the mud. And so a lot of people worked really hard. And unfortunately, women still need to work really hard for their rights. So there are still things that we need to work for, like equal pay, control over our own bodies, all those things that are still really important that we work for. So there you go. There's my 2 cents on the soapbox. Okay, so I'm going to invite my friends. Thank you. I hope it was as good as everyone was worked up about. So I'm going to invite my friends from Seek to go on down to the Stokey Library. And I'm going to invite all of you to raise your voices and sing us out.
Thank you, Kate and company. That was awesome. Well, this morning, as the offering received, I want you to know that your support of this congregation changes lives. The work of this congregation touches lives. Each Sunday, as you gather here, as people tune in on Zoom, lives are touched. Throughout the week, when someone clicks on a replay of the service and feels not so alone, lives that you may never even meet have been touched. Each time you engage in justice making and social action, lives are changed. And each time you reach out to each other with a friendly, "How are you doing?" and an open heart to receive the answer, lives are touched. So thank you for your offerings this morning and for keeping this congregation alive.
Good morning. I'm Julia Kenny. My pronouns are she, hers, and I'm a lay minister of this congregation. This is a time in our service we set aside to acknowledge the joys and sorrows that we all hold. In both our sharing and in our witness, we affirm our covenant to care for one another. Every Sunday, we light a vigil candle in recognition of the pain and suffering being experienced around the world due to ongoing war and violence. May this small act help us unite in our prayer for the end to all suffering. If you have a personal joy or sorrow you would like to share, please feel free to come forward now or raise your hand and I'll bring you the mic. Those online can type your joys and sorrows in the chat and I will read them.
Hi, I'm Susie Key.
And those we hold in silence. May it be so.
This morning, this is our time where we take a moment to go inward. We call it our time of centering. And we open it up for any way that feels good to you. Some people like to close their eyes, take a few deep breaths. Some people just like to gaze down a little bit, have a moment. Just take a breath, go inside. Especially after we've heard people share joys and sorrows. It's a nice time to pause and take those in, and we send out a special prayer, Phyllis, to you and your family at this time, holding them in our hearts. During our meditation, I'm going to be sharing a poem by someone named Amy Hasen. Amy was a participant in a women's writing group I had the privilege to co-facilitate several years ago in Greenfield, Massachusetts. The group is called Voices from Inside, and it's a writing form for women who have been formerly incarcerated. Many of the women who participated had also dealt with substance abuse as well as physical and sexual abuse in their lives. So to prepare for receiving these words, I'm going to invite you to center yourselves, take a few deep breaths, relax, and reminding yourself that this ability to draw the focus inward is a necessary tool in our work for justice. As you settle into your own quiet place, I'm going to also invite you to bring to mind some of the women that you have known in your life, perhaps someone who is currently in your life or someone who has been in your life. Just go ahead and see their faces in front of you. You may want to also bring to mind those women who have inspired you through their words and deeds. And if you identify as a woman, I invite you to also bring the image of yourself in your mind's eye. Softly gazing at all of these women, receive these words from Amy Hasen. This poem is called What I Want You to Know About These Women. What I want you to know is that these women are incredible women. I want you to know that these women have been through hell and lived to tell, that these women have the kind of resilience most only dream of having, and that these women are more resourceful than you can imagine. And I want you to know that these women love with all their hearts, that they have and have had your back through thick and thin. What I want you to know is that these women have stories to tell that will leave you wanting more. That these beautiful women have been beaten down, kicked to the ground, and stepped on, but still these women, these powerful, resilient women, rise to meet the day, to find their courage and say, I am here, I am somebody, I matter. What I want you to know is that these women are some of the most incredible women this woman has ever known. So again, taking a moment to pause and just visualize some of the most amazing women you've known in your life. Sending them a prayer of thanksgiving for their contribution. And as you feel ready, feel free to open your eyes. Remember the ladies and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors. And this is a quote, "Do not put such unlimited power into the hands of the husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could." They left that line out of the song. If particular care and attention is not paid to the ladies, we are determined to foment a rebellion and will not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which we have no voice or representation, end quote. And that was Abigail Adams, who wrote these words in a letter to her husband, John Adams, on March 31st, 1776. Nearly 150 years before the House of Representatives voted to pass the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. And nearly 241 years before millions of women would don their pink pussy hats and march in solidarity. Indeed, the rebellion is far from over. Today, 7 years after women across the world began to call out abuse with the hashtag #MeToo, I feel today a need to reflect on why. Why, though things have changed since 1776, why is there still so far to go when it comes to changing the fundamental structures that birthed the women's oppression and keep it alive and well today? Well, in marketing and politics, they say it is all about the messaging, so I think that's a good place to begin. And for me, I remember being aware of the subtle messages about my place in the world as a woman. The first time I became aware of them was on an innocent car drive with my mother in the 1970s. I was born in the 1970s, for those of you that were wondering. I was at the tender age of 11 or 12 years old at the time, just beginning to be more aware of how others viewed me as a female. Now, on this particular day, Mom was driving in her typical lead foot fashion, which was common for her, and so it was not surprising that as we were speedily bumping down the back roads of rural Pennsylvania, we were soon greeted by the sounds of a police car siren behind us. Now, perhaps I looked concerned, and my mother just wanted to reassure me, or perhaps she was wanting to teach me a lesson she felt might come in handy as I got older. Whatever the motivation, as we sat on the side of the road awaiting the officer to approach our car, my mother gave me a little side nod and lifted her eyes and said, "Watch this." And then, as if she was flipping on the front porch light, Mom clicked on the charm. She calmly rolled down the window, tilted her head slightly, smiled, softened her voice, and said, "Oh, was I going too fast?" A brief conversation followed with some awkward laughs and more soft smiles, and well, let's just say we did not get a speeding ticket that day. Now, I acknowledge that this conversation may have gone differently had my mother not been a white woman. But for me as a young girl trying to figure out the world I was in, this incident became a powerful lesson that would be reinforced by many more lessons from society that they were poised to give me about being a woman. Lessons that would try to convince me that my sexuality and my appearance would be the main sources of my power. Lessons that would try to teach me where I should place my own self-worth. Lessons that would try to dictate what I as a woman could do and how I should behave while doing it. In other words, the world was poised to give me lessons in misogyny. Now, in her book, Down Girl, The Logic of Misogyny, Cornell philosophy professor Kate Manne argues that contrary to popular belief, misogyny is not simply about one individual male's hostility or hatred towards women. Instead, she says, and I'll quote, "Misogynistic behavior is about hostility towards women who violate patriarchal norms and expectations, who aren't serving male interests in the way they're expected to." So there's this sense, she continues, that women are doing something wrong, that they're morally objectionable or have a bad attitude, or they're abrasive or shrill or too pushy. But women only appear that way, she concludes, because we expect them to be otherwise. We expect them to be passive. Another great philosopher of our time put it this way, and I'll see if you can tell the philosopher's name by these words. "I am so sick of running as fast as I can, wondering if I'd get there quicker if I was a man. And I'm so sick of them coming at me again, because if I was a man, then I'd be the man. They say I'd hustle, put in the work. They wouldn't shake their heads and question how much of this I deserve. What I was wearing, if I was rude, could be separated from my good ideas and power moves." Anybody know this philosopher? Yes. I knew a mother, a young girl knew that. Thank you, well sung, Taylor Swift. It's a really great song. A few years ago, a Nike ad featured a voiceover by Serena Williams outlining the dilemma most women find themselves in. She says, "If we show emotions, we're called dramatic." The voice says this as scenes of women in full athletic expression scroll by the screen. "If we want to play against men, we're nuts. And if we dream of equal opportunity, delusional. When we stand up for something, we're unhinged. When we're too good, there's something wrong with us. And if we get angry, we're hysterical, irrational, or just being crazy." Anyone relate? In the 1949 classic, The Second Sex, French existentialist philosopher Simone de Beauvoir, I hope I did that right, put it this way, and I quote her, "Representation of the world, like the world itself, is the work of men. They describe it from their own point of view, which they confuse with absolute truth." Now, my mother was not the first woman to unknowingly give the lesson to a daughter that her worth was somehow connected to the worth placed on her by men, and that sexuality was her main road for power. Nor was she the first to receive such a lesson, I am sure, and sadly, I am quite sure as well that I gave this lesson to my own daughters in one way or another. It is a lesson that every human in a female-appearing body and identity has gotten either explicitly or implicitly, subtly or not so subtly. For most of us in female-identified bodies, we are taught to imagine ourselves as we are growing up as the pretty princess, ready to be rescued by a charming prince. Or we are taught that we should be the thin, hot, young, supporting lady in the movie next to the much older, less attractive, but also rich hero. In the process, we are groomed. We are groomed to the view that, hey, baby, is actually okay, that it's a compliment. We are groomed to think that comments like, "you wouldn't understand," or "that's not girls' work," were for our own good. Even the former First Lady of the country tried to reassure us that perverse sexual comments made by men, even by our own husbands towards other women, were just, quote, "locker room talk," and not a big deal because, of course, boys were just being boys. But when a culture defines feminine worth as primarily sexual terms, it puts her on this never-ending struggle to survive as the natural aging process marches forward, right? Ask any woman over 50 about her invisibility, and she will surely have tales to tell. She may just be coming into her strength in her career or in her full creative expression, and yet her net worth has taken a severe drop in the eyes of half the population. Some may say, what's the big deal? Well, when you have had to work extra hard to prove your competence in a profession traditionally dominated by and thought of as belonging to men, believe me, it is a big deal. And while I stand here as a white American woman declaring the need for us to do better, I am aware that there are many women of different identities residing in different places around the world whose experience is even more dire. Audre Lorde speaks bluntly about this when she says, "Those of us who stand outside the circle of society's definition of acceptable woman, those of us who have been forged in the crucible of difference, those of us who are poor, who are lesbian, who are black, who are older, know that survival is not an academic skill. For the master's tools will not dismantle the master's house. They will never allow us to bring about genuine change." And so for women everywhere this morning, I'm going to offer 3 bold systemic changes that I believe we must rise up to meet in order to finally bring about genuine change for all women. So I'm going to take these one at a time. There's 3. The first of these changes takes us all the way back to the frameworks of much of the religion in this country. Now, I recently saw this advertisement for a seminar called Women in Christianity. Lectures were to include women in the Bible, women's prayer lives, women in the Christian home, among other topics. Now, I kid you not, every single presenter listed for that seminar, and there were about 6 or 7, every single one of them and I don't know about you, but I'm thinking a discussion of Christian women in the home, Christian women prayer, might be best led by a woman. But this Father knows best hubris is not surprising when we consider that traditionally most religions practiced by Westerners were monotheistic, and most contemporary expressions of their monotheism of one supreme God use male-gendered terms and masculine attributes when describing this God, right? We all know them. God as Father, God as Son, God as He. God is the gray-haired, bearded man on the mountain reaching his hand out to yours. And of course, this one, God's first creation would be in his likeness, right? It's a boy. Surprise. But let's face it, everybody, no matter what your religious leanings, who doesn't think God when you hear Morgan Freeman's voice? The one true God was indeed assigned male at birth, and with that designation was endowed with the inherent worthiness to command the heavens and earth, to bring about floods and locusts and fires, and to have dominion over his subservient creation. The issue with this construct is not only does it limit the idea as God as male, but it limits the idea of supreme power to the attributes of power over. It is no wonder that men who have been taught that they are made in the image of God would also be taught to act in his likeness. To be a man is to take power, to dole out orders and punishments, and to demand subordination. These ideas have shaped our nation and the world, and I believe have done such great harm. Now, of course, the idea of many gods and goddesses lives on in Hinduism and paganism and some other religious practices. Although I have to say, often even now, these goddesses are sometimes considered as consorts to the male counterparts, and often modern depictions have the goddess be in a more submissive place. I'm not saying a religion can't be monotheistic if it really wants to be. But I'm simply saying that when the one true God is a white dude to be feared, who has the power over every breath, who has the power over the female body and life, we got a problem. I know you're not an amen congregation, but I feel you're wanting to say it. If we are to shift the paradigm of misogyny, of privileging the idea of male as the exemplar of creation, we must rise up and redefine our vision of the divine and the creative life force. So systemic change number one, rise up and reject all religious frameworks that build in feminine inferiority, going back to the very core constructs of theology. Okay. That was just number one. Let's see what number two is. Number two, which is related to number one. Quite simply, I think it's time that we figure out how to create a society based on power with each other, not power over each other. There's another amen moment. Some people describe this as feminine power. This power is one that operates by using all those attributes that we as women have been taught to put in the closet if we are to be successful in this society. Feminine power is about relationships. It's about cooperation, intuition, emotion. Feminine power is the energy that calls forces together. It is the power to act with, not against. It's the power of we, not I. Starhawk once said, "It bothers me when people perceive the goddess as a god in a skirt." What she was talking about is this recognition that masculine and feminine energies are different at their core, and that's good. If we as women try to claim space for ourselves in society but operate on the same principles of dominance and inherent superiority, we will simply be entering a game of tennis, much like our political games and our political system right now, where the seat of power goes back and forth and back and forth, but the paradigm of power never really changes. Power with teaches us that all are sacred, all have something to offer, and that our greatest fulfillment comes in the process, not simply the achievement. And to be clear, no matter what body we occupy, we have the opportunity to embrace and express feminine energy, just as we have the opportunity to express masculine energy. So the second change, we must rise up and embrace the feminine energy that causes us to operate as power with each other, not power over. And we must embrace the feminine energy that invites our emotional, intuitive selves into the conversation. And now the third change I feel is necessary, and here I'm going to speak directly to those of you that identify as women in the room. In her essay, Women, Race, and Memory, Toni Morrison recounts the struggles of Harriet Tubman to receive the veterans pay that she was due for her service. It was a request that combined issues of race and sex and class and worth and power, and it would take about 30 years for that to be resolved. Morrison states that at the heart of that 19th century battle for equality is the burning question for modern-day feminism. How can a woman be viewed and respected as a human being without becoming a male-like or male-dominated citizen? Morrison goes on to make a provocative claim about this question, and she says this. She says that chief among the reasons that the verdict is still out about whether we can be respected as a human being is, and she's speaking to women, our own conscious and unconscious complicity with the forces that have kept sexism the oldest oppression in the world. And Morrison calls our complicity our own self-saboteur. And I know you know what I mean, women. And she says, and I wholly agree, that it is our own doubts about our worth, our own woman-to-woman rivalries, and our own beliefs that maleness and its qualities we've assigned to it are in fact superior. So often as women, we hold up the images created in the likeness of man and masculine desire and judge our worthiness by those rulers. And I think it's time we change the rulers or just put the rulers down altogether. We must find out who we are, not as a reflection of someone else. We must be willing to strip away what we've been taught about our own worth as females and find the joy in female expression in all its beautiful forms, on our own terms. So change number 3. As women, we must rise up and reclaim and relocate the root of our own self-worth. Women rising is not about women rising up just to fit into a masculine world, nor is it learning how to wield our feminine charms to have power over men or over other women, nor is it about putting men down or trying to power move men out of the way. Women rising is a time to rise up into a new paradigm of masculine and feminine energies working together, of men and women and non-binary people working together in synergy, honoring the unique gifts of all. If we want to thrive on this planet, we can no longer afford to have girls and women bullied into silent shadows of their full selves. We can no longer afford a male God who wields his power over a woman's body, over a woman's voice, over a woman's spirit. And we can no longer afford to have our leaders be people who see their role as one which is endowed with the power over the people. It is time for a new paradigm, I think. And it's darn time, my female friends, that we see ourselves as real, as sacred, as worthy, and as beautiful. So may we rise up together into that new, beautiful world. And to that I say, amen. I invite you into a moment of quiet reflection. Going to extinguish our chalice and then invite Emily to come forward for an amazing, fun closing song. So if you'd like to join me, the words are in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and out into the world until we are together again. And I apologize, we are going over today by 1 or 2 minutes, but don't go nowhere, it's worth it.
It should be good. So I'd like to invite all the people in the congregation who identify as women to rise either in body and spirit. So this is a chant that we're going to do, a kind of song chant. I'm going to teach it to you first, call and response, and then we're just going to do that first verse, the one that's woman am I, a couple of times, maybe 4 or 5 times, until it feels like we have risen in the room, until we can feel the resonant energy of, the fomenting rebellion, as is said. And then I'll call out that we're going to start the second verse, the blessed am I. And at that point, I will ask that those who identify as men will join us. But first, we're going to learn it in a call and response way. Marilyn, could you give me a G? Here we go. So the first two phrases are the same. They go like this. Woman am I, spirit am I. Woman am I, spirit am I. Second phrase, kind of like the same, you know. I am the infinite within my soul. I am the infinite within my soul. Third one's a little different. I have no beginning and I have no end. I have no beginning and I have no end. And we finish it off. All this I am. All this I am. Ready? Women am I, spirit am I. I am the infinite within my soul. I have no beginning and I have no end. All this I am. Women am I, spirit am I. I am the infinite within my soul. I have no beginning and I have no end. All this I am. Women am I, spirit am I. I am the infinite within my soul. I have no beginning and I have no end. All this I am. Women am I, spirit am I. I am the infinite within my soul. I have no beginning and I have no end. All this I am. Woman am I, spirit am I. I am the infinite within my soul. I have no beginning and I have no end. All this I am. Blessed am I, spirit am I. I am the
Men can rise if you would like.
I have no beginning and I have no end.
All this I am.
Blessed am I, spirit am I. I am the infinite within my soul. I have no beginning and I have no end. All this I am. Blessed am I, spirit am I. I am the infinite within my soul. I have no beginning and I have no end. All this I am. All this I am. One more time. All this I am.
That was awesome. So I'm going to end where we began this morning with Audre Lorde, who reminds us, I am not free while any woman is unfree, even when her shackles are very different from my own. So may we all work together to free each other, men, women, non-binary brothers, sisters, friends, whoever you are, however you identify as yourself. May you find your true expression of you. And let's work together to make sure that each and every person has the space to express themselves. Yes? Yes. All right. Go now in peace and take peace wherever you go. Thank you for joining us this morning.